Hey, I got a mighty serious question for you right here to kick us off this morning. And no joke, it's a serious question. If you were to die tonight and you had a 30-minute warning, you arrive at the emergency room and the doctor tells you got 30 minutes to live, but this is non-negotiable. There's nothing we can do. You're dying tonight. Simple question. Would you feel as though you had completed what you were supposed to do in this life? Let me put it a different way. Would you feel as though, oh God, there's so much important stuff that I never got around to doing. There are things I wanted to do that I needed to do, and now they're not going to get done. Apply it a little different way. Would you have this feeling that now, because I'm dying now, instead of 30 years later as I expected, now my life is not going to count, or now I won't be able to look back on my life and feel good about it? Well, here's the reason I ask that. A lot of us have this notion in our heads that the only way to live a full, meaningful life is to live to a ripe old age and die in your bed with all your children around you. That's what the Old Testament saints all prayed for. And yet, what I want to point out to you is that Jesus died mighty young. Early 30s. Younger than a whole lot of folks in the room. I bet there's even folks in the room who could have been Jesus' granddaddy. You know, I remember when I was 33 and it seemed so cool. I was the same age as Jesus, you know. Now I'd be his big brother. But Jesus only lived 33 years. And in spite of that, on the very last night of his life, though he was only 33 years old, he was able to make a statement to God I don't know I'd be able to make. I hope you could. It's in John 17, verse 4. Knowing he's dying the next day, listen to what Jesus said. I brought glory to you here on earth by completing the work you gave me to do. Let that sink in. How many 33-year-olds do you know? What about when you were 33? Some of you are. Some of you are not yet there. 33 years old, he's about to die, and he can say, I've completed it. I've done what you put me here to do. I don't know whether or not many of us could honestly say or pray that if it came time for us tonight. But the goal of the sermon today is to help us reorient our ways of thinking, to get back on track, to reorganize whatever it is about our lives that is currently messing us up, diverting our attention and our energy and our time and our money to all sorts of things which are really just filling our lives with a whole lot of busyness that never really ends. If you're like most people, if you're like I was for many, many years of life, every night I lay down to go to sleep, I could think of dozens of things that I didn't get done, that I wanted to get done. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Do you ever lay down at night and you look back and you're almost frustrated because of all you didn't get done? Well, here's good news. Here's good news. Jesus demonstrated that it is possible to live in such a way that whether you live to be 33 or 103, you can come to the last day of your life, look back on it and say, I completed what God gave me to do. You can do that. But there's something else you can't do. And that is, you will never get to the point in life. Now, if you live to be 933, where you can look back and say, hey, I got everything done that everybody wanted me to do. Because that ain't going to happen. It didn't happen for Methuselah, and it's not going to happen for you. Because there's a world of difference between the things God gives us to do, which are the things that count, which are the things that matter when we're dying and looking back. And then there are the things people give us to do. And there's no end to those things. And if you and I don't learn to tell the difference, we can easily spend so much of our time on the things that we think we ought to be doing and people tell us we ought to be doing, and live empty lives. Don't that happen? Truth is, although you only live once is enough if you work it right. I didn't make that up. That's John Maxwell. We'll throw it on the screen for you. You only live once, but once is enough if you work it right. So, how do we work it right? How do we work it? How do we arrange it so that you can get your life so well oriented, so in balance, so much in alignment with what God has for you to do, that you get her done and you will live and die with no real regrets. How do we do that? Well, first of all, we got to learn to look at the things that we need to say no to. Jesus said no to a whole bunch of things and a whole bunch of people. In his 33 years, according to the scriptures at least, you count it up, he healed approximately 50 blind people, a dozen deaf people, raised a couple from the dead. He healed 50 lepers. But my goodness, for every 50 lepers, there were 50,000 more that he did not get around to. You're starting to get this? For all 50 of those blind people he healed all over the world, there were 50,000 more that he did not get around to. So when I say that there are always people who would like for us to do more for them, I'm not saying that those are bad people. I'm not saying that all of their requests, all the things they want or need from us are illegitimate. It's just that there are limitations to even what Jesus could do, and he realized it. He had a short time, and he was going to make it count, and once was enough for him. And so, I want to take you to the book of Mark, chapter 1, and show you a glimpse into a day in the life of Jesus. This is going to be a longer passage than I normally read at once, but it's important that you go all the way through this one with me before we say too much. That evening after sunset, work day's over, you'd think. No, not for Jesus. That evening after sunset, many sick and demon-possessed people were brought to Jesus. The whole town gathered at the door to watch. So Jesus healed many people who were sick with various diseases, and he cast out many demons. But because the demons knew who he was, he did not allow them to speak. Before daybreak the next morning, Jesus got up and went out to to an isolated place to pray. Later, Simon and the others went to find him. When they found him, they said, "Everyone's looking for you." Some of you know what that's like. So everybody's looking for me. Everybody's needing something, and I haven't gotten it done. Peter pointed that out to Jesus. Hey, there's still people back there at the house waiting. They appreciate what you did last night, but there's more to do, Jesus. Jesus was a little bit smarter than some of us. Here's what he said. When Peter said, "Everyone's looking for you," Jesus replied, "We must go on to other towns as well. I will preach to them too. That's why I came." What do you have right there? You got a man who realizes, I got one life, but it'll be enough if I work it right. And that means if I give too much of myself to any one thing, to any one group of people, if I spend too much of my time and energy, even in good places where when it really needs to be spent in other places, I'm gonna stay so busy doing good stuff that I don't get my work completed. So Jesus left and he moved on with a whole lot of people. Where's he going? Where's he going? I needed something. I'm just saying this, something some of you need to hear. Jesus did not do everything that everybody asked him to do. Neither should you. Neither can you. Now, if you try, you will live one hectic, crazy, messed up life. I want to read you a verse from Ecclesiastes 5:17. Describes the way a whole lot of people live. Ecclesiastes 5:17. Throughout their lives, they live under a cloud, frustrated, discouraged, and angry. Let's leave that one there for a minute. Throughout their lives, they live under a cloud. Anything sound familiar about that? This cloud of to-dos that's always hovering over me, is hovering over me as I'm fading off to sleep. It's right there in my face when I wake up. I'm frustrated, I'm discouraged, I'm angry. If you find yourself angry, frustrated, and discouraged, especially when you find yourself angry at the people you're really trying to help, that's a good sign that you may be doing things you really shouldn't be doing. When you start resenting people, good people, that you keep saying yes to, it's time to recognize, boop, beep, beep. That's a sign. That's your sign. That's your sign. Back away from that and realize, hey, I'm only going to live once. I've got to make sure I work this right. If I don't, you'll be like the people Henry David Thoreau described, the vast majority of men, the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. We're not talking about a way that just a few special individuals live. We're talking about the mass of people on earth live lives of quiet desperation, meaning, I think, it's a frustrating existence. They're like a rat on a wheel, running as fast as they can, but don't seem to be getting anywhere. Very frustrated with the way my life is, and I don't know how to change it. And the answer is, if you are frustrated with the way your life is, if you're discouraged with any area of your life, whether it be your marriage, your children, something to do with your work, your relationship with God, you're discouraged in the way that's not happening. If you find yourselves with this desperation, there's one thing that has to happen for it to change, and that is you are going to have to change something. It's not going to take care of itself. Nobody is going to march into your life with a notebook and say, okay, you've got to cut out X, Y, Z, and 1, 2, 3, and you've got to add 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Nobody else is going to do that for you. If you don't do that for yourself, it won't happen. And you'll live the rest of your life the way you may be feeling right now. Exasperated, frustrated. There's so much undone. You got to be able to establish boundaries for yourself, boundaries with other people. Many of you are familiar with a book called Boundaries by Cloud and Townsend. If you've not read that one, and you're one of those people who has trouble saying no to stuff, read Boundaries by Cloud and Townsend. There's an older book that you might have trouble finding, but I'll tell you the title of it, because the title may be enough for some of us. It's a copyright 1975. I came across it in something like 2005, written by Manuel Smith, and the title is, When I Say No, I Feel Guilty. Even if you don't read that book, what do you read from the title? When I say no, I feel guilty. Listen, if you don't already know it, there's true guilt and there's false guilt. We've got to learn to tell the difference between genuine, true guilt and false guilt. How do you tell the difference? True guilt is going to be from God, but how do you know it's from God? With true guilt, you've broken some commandment. You've refused to do something Scripture teaches you should do. Or you've pushed ahead and done something Scripture says you should not do. And those things happen. There's enough guilt. Believe me, there's plenty of guilt if that's all the guilt you got. But that kind of guilt is much easier to deal with because of who you're dealing with. You're dealing with a God who's anxious to forgive, take those sins, cast them away as far as the east is from the west, bury them in the sea of forgetfulness. But here's how you know the false guilt. The false guilt is always going to be coming from other people. It's going to be coming from those people to whom you said no. False guilt is going to be coming from the people currently involved in your life who want things from you that you really don't need to be doing for them. Or it may be people with genuine needs and you're capable of doing it, and yet you have to say no because you don't have time, and they make you feel guilty. Some of us feel guilty just because of people from the past, programming from the past. Programming from the past that makes us feel guilty anytime we're not doing something that seems constructive. And we talked about this last week with the Sabbath, how God intentionally taught us to build margins in our lives. Margins. I've talked about this. I won't talk much about this because I've done a whole sermon on this topic, but I want to show you a quick picture. Piece of notebook paper. You remember margins, notebook paper when you were learning to write in school. You remember the teachers would tell us, you start just to the right of the red line, and you write all the way across until you come to the red line on the right side of the page. And when you get there, what? You stop. No matter what. Even if you're in the middle of a big word, you stop and you make a hyphen. You just got to put the hyphen in the right place, but you stop. and you start over on the next line. Why did they stress that to us? Why was that such a big deal? It seemed nitpicky, and it aggravated me. If I went over the margin a little bit, the teacher would mark off three or 5 points. Well, there's a deeper lesson there. Let me show you what a life without margins looks like. Take a look at this. That's much more the way a whole lot of people's lives look. No margins, no regard for margins. You just start writing on one extreme end of the page and you write to the other and you cram it full. And guess what? There's no room for anything else. You know, the truth is there are some things we should be saying yes to, but we cannot afford to under the current arrangement because there's nowhere to put it. There's no time for it. There's no energy left for it. There's no money left for it. You know, to tell you the truth, I think if I had to say there's one thing at CCF that we really need to work on, one thing that holds us back, one thing that prevents us from doing what we could do, reaching whom we could reach, it's this. We don't have enough people with enough margin to actually do the things that need doing. I'll give you an example. That picture, let's put that there and keep it there while we talk. The truth is that today, more than ever before, my generation, the generation just below me and maybe just above me, this is the way our lives look. And it's not that we really work any more hours. If anything, today's generations actually work less on average. It's not that. It's that we have so many other activities, especially related to kids, especially with the coming of, what's it called? The cheering, competitive sports and cheer that adds a whole new dimension, taking up weekends. And everybody else does that stuff, and so we got to have our kids in that stuff. And it takes up a whole lot of weekends and in the lives of people who already don't have margins. And so we have a shortage. We actually don't have a shortage of young adults. Thank God for that. We do have a shortage of young adults with margins, who have enough margin in their life to make room for something bigger than their own families. That's stating it plain. When a new couple comes into the church, new couple visits, young couple, they're looking for other young couples. They're nervous, they're scared, they don't know these people. They walk in, if they don't pretty quickly see other young adults who get up from wherever they're sitting and go and engage them, who make room in their lives, maybe cancel a few things in order to say, hey, you want to go to lunch Thursday? We're having a party. We're having a supper club this Thursday night. Would you come? Sure would like for you to. It's hard to bring somebody else to something that we don't have time to go to ourselves. And this is not about guilt. This is just about the reality of how much time we have and how we're going to spend it. I can't tell you how many times I've found myself driving to a hospital to make a visit, or even across town, and for example, I'm on the go because I've allowed just enough time to get there. There's no margin. And so, you know what? If I see somebody with a flat tire, even if it's a woman or an elderly person beside the road, do you know I can't really afford to stop? Even though I'm a tire man. My daddy runs a tire store, and I know that stuff. But without a margin, if I stop and help with that flat, I'm not going to do something. Something else is not going to get done that seems essential. And so, as I'm preaching to you, I'm preaching to myself and saying, when we set forth our schedules for the week, let's start putting some flex time in there. Flex time for the unexpected opportunities. Flex time for people who need us. And when it comes to our social calendar, let me say this very clearly. When I lived in my hometown, Monroeville, Alabama, it was about the same size as Mena. All my family was there. Looking back on those days, I was there in ministry for 10 years. You know what I realized looking back? I never hung out with anybody except for my family, because they all live right there too. And I like hanging out with my family, and that's a good thing. And so I prioritized that. Do you know what? I lived in my hometown, and during the 10 years that I was there in ministry as an adult, we're not talking about growing up, we're talking about age 24 to 34, I made very few new friends, and I was a minister. I did not form any serious friendships because my family, it was all about that. There was no room. And there was also nobody there to tell me what I'm now telling you. The good is the enemy of the best, C.S. Lewis used to say. The good is the enemy of the best. You got family in Mena, Arkansas, that's good. You are blessed. I envy you for that. I wish I had that. That's one of the few things I don't like about being here, is I just need to move all my family right here. But I also got margin now. And I intentionally, constantly look for new relationships. But I'm just one person. And we need a whole lot more people creating margins in your social calendar, making room in your life, and even in your heart. Because it really comes down to the heart. Here's something you've heard your whole life. You know it's true. I know it's true, but it's easy to forget. Whatever's most important to us, we always manage to get done. Whether it's truly important or not. Notice I said whatever's really important to us, we manage to get done. Well, what if what's important to me and what's important to God are not even on the same page, not even in the same notebook? And what if my life is so slam full of stuff that I think is a big deal, that if I keep going the way I'm going, and my time comes, and I'm at the end of my life looking back, I'll be able to say some of the, I will be able to say some of the things that, quote, good people say. Well, I was good to my family, took care of them, spent time with them, loved my children, and that's mighty important. If you didn't, we'd have a serious problem. But here's what Jesus said. Jesus said, even unbelievers do that much. And if that's all you do, what more What's the difference in you and a non-believer? Whoo! Other than church attendance, other than being a member of an organization, when it comes to the way I schedule my time and the way I manage my money, allowing margins for unexpected needs that may arise in front of me, somebody who's genuinely in need, and they need $100, they need $500. This is somebody, it's not we're not talking about some schemer, crook passing through town. We're talking about somebody I know this is a genuine need. I wish I could help, but what if I can't because there are no margins in my finances? I spend everything I make making payments. Jerry Clower used to say, if I miss one paycheck, I have to go to the penitentiary. That close to the margin. I'm saying when you're living that close to the margin, you can't help anybody. You're barely afloat yourself. That's not something to feel guilty about. Don't go home ashamed. No. I've sure spent my time there. Somebody had to point it out to me, though, like I'm pointing it out to you. You want your life to count for God. You want to get to the end of your life, look back and say, I've completed what you gave me to do. Then it's going to call for starting over with a fresh new list, a new fresh piece of paper like that one, where you go home and you write down, here are the things I must do. These are non-negotiables. I've got to work. I've got to take care of my family, whatever that means in your particular case. Jesus said, Paul said, if you don't take care of your own family, you're worse than an unbeliever. That's non-negotiable. Do that. Write down the essentials. And then before you start writing down anything else, ask, what am I doing on a regular basis with my time, with my money, with my energy? What am I doing on a regular basis that actually has something to do with completing the work God has for me to do? What am I doing with people who need me? Am I making space for them? Do I even care? If you want to serve God, the way you do it is by serving people. Well, you got to remember, we got a God who needs nothing. But Jesus said, when you do it and give it to the least of these, you know who the least are? It's that person who's only been in town a month, and they'll probably only stay here a year or two, so why get involved with them? That's least. We're no kin to them. I didn't go to high school with her. She's not in any social circle that's going to be beneficial to me. Come on. When you do it to the least, the people who have the least amount to offer you in exchange, that's when you're doing it for Jesus. You only live once, but once is enough if you work it right. I'm asking, are you working it right? What does the page of your life look like? What needs to be crossed out? What needs to be added? Don't wait on that.